famous in today's market, and what are the benefits of applying Agile rather than using the traditional approach. I also give you a brief walkthrough of how the requirements are gathered and written in Agile. There is a specific format, and we call the requirements in Agile as user stories. Then I had covered the product backlog, which lists all the user stories on a very high priority, and the team picks up the requirements which adds value to the customer, which are more crucial to be delivered based on the time. So today I'll be covering the Agile estimation and the various techniques which we use in Agile, and later how do we prioritize the requirement in Agile. So estimation, I guess everybody must have done estimation at any point of their life. So in software development, it is considered as a very hard task, especially for the software developers, because the whole timeline of the project resides on the estimation which is coming in from the development. So if you screw up on your estimation, then the whole time frame of the project goes for a toss. So it's very crucial that you get it right when you are doing the estimation part. Otherwise, you have to sit up late during the weekends and compensate for the work which you have estimated very wrongly, or you have not come up with a good estimate for that particular work. So one of the key advantages of adopting to Agile workflow is the ability of the. But many times the teams which are new to Agile, they face the difficulty figuring out how to estimate the requirement effectively. So today I will explain you the concept of relative estimation, which is one of the key to the success of Agile adoption. So if you see on the screen here, you see there are various fruits which are listed here. So now if I ask you, if you can give me the actual size of fruit number 1, that is the dried grapes. So how would you come up with the actual size of it? You can mention it on the chat windows. You can enter the figure or the size which you feel like on the chat window. So let's keep it on an inches basis. So considering fruit 1, okay, I'll start with estimation of fruit 1. I'm estimating fruit 1 as 2 inches. So anybody wants to give a different opinion or come up with a different size of fruit 1, they can mention it on the chat window. Okay, so considering that, if I ask you how big is fruit 2 as compared to fruit 1, we might get varying responses. Somebody might say it's 5 inches, somebody might say 6 inches. But if I ask you to compare it with respect to fruit 1, you might all agree that it is twice as bigger than fruit 1. The same applies to fruit number 5. If I ask you to give me an absolute estimate, somebody might say it's 15 inches, somebody might say it's all around. But if I ask you to compare it with one baseline, considering fruit 1 as a baseline, how big is fruit 5 as compared to fruit 1? You might give a common response that it is 4 times bigger or it is 5 times bigger, and the whole team can agree to it. So the cornerstone of relative estimation is comparing it with some baseline. So if I ask you here, if I ask for the team to come up with an estimate on an absolute scale, they come up with a varying one. But the relative one, if humans are very good at estimation when they have to compare something with something else. So that is called as relative estimation. So if you see here in Agile estimation, we have different techniques, that is t-shirt sizing. Then we have something called as the large, medium, small scales. Here you compare the requirements on Agile based on the baseline of one particular requirements. Here the whole team is involved in coming up with an estimation. So here the relative estimation does not worry about how exactly big the requirement is. You have to just worry about how big the requirement is as compared with the other requirement. So for example here, it comes up to 2 days of estimation work. But if I ask you to create a report, that is another requirement. So you can compare it with the login page. So creating a report, that requirement is twice as large than the login page. So it comes to 4 days. So it is twice the amount of the requirement one. So relative estimation focuses on size and complexity. So this is the cornerstone of Agile planning. So this happens at the story level. Estimation is done at the story points. I explained in the last webinar that we have user stories, which forms the requirements of Agile, and later user stories are broken down into tasks. The estimation in Agile, you do the relative estimation, and then when the user stories are divided into tasks, you do the absolute estimation. So the tasks are broken down into hours, and they are estimated in the number of hours which is required to complete that particular task. So it is the ideal time for that particular estimation. So if you see here, Agile estimation, it relies on the cone of uncertainty. When you get a requirement, you're not sure about what exactly is needed for that particular requirement to be complete. So you go ahead with the t-shirt sizing. You actually divide all the, that is t-shirt sizes, small, medium, large, extra large, and so on. Then you divide them into story points. That is on the, as I explained you earlier, this particular story is twice as larger than the other story, or it is thrice as larger than the other story. So the number which you use here for relative estimation is called as story points. And finally, you divide it into tasks which are done into hours estimation. So what is story point? Story point is nothing but it is a numeric value which is assigned to a user story. So it is only depending on the degree of efforts which is required to complete that particular requirement, nothing else. So why do we use actually story point in Agile estimation is because we have to figure out how big or small that particular requirement is in terms of execution. And we have a particular range of using the story points that's called as Fibonacci series, which is the range as it is displayed on the screen. The addition of first two numbers leads to the number. So this is the range which we use for deriving the story points in Agile. So for example, if you have one task which is very simple, it is only in one line change and there are no dependencies, then you can assign it as story point 1. And for example, you have one task which is more complex. It requires some analysis on implementation and various other setups or any extra additional work required to complete that particular requirement. Then you will compare it with the first task, that is with the story point 1, and you will identify how much of an effort, extra effort is needed for completing that particular requirement. And then you might assign it story point 5 because it is 5 times the effort which is needed to complete that as compared to the earliest user story or the requirement. So if you see here in the table which I have shown below, it lists down the actual criteria of assigning the story points. So every team can come up with their varying definition of story points. Because if a team is very efficient and it has been working on a particular product for a longer time, they might feel that one particular complex items is very easier to them. And the other team which is very new to the product, they might feel that it is rather complex. So it depends on the team size and also the team efforts and how the team picks up that particular requirement. So any questions still here? The relative estimation and absolute estimation in Agile. If you have, you can just put it on the chat window out here.
Okay, Anu, there is a question from Shiv Naresh. So I will unmute him and he can ask the question. You can ask Mr. Shiv Naresh, you can ask the question over.
Okay.
Yeah, I have unmuted you, Mr. Shiv Naresh.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Anushree. Thanks for this presentation. I'm definitely recalling. First of all, the background is that I work for one of the Agile projects, though I myself not a specialist in the Agile, estimation and a couple of areas. One of the major blunder that happened for the project was they used the exactly same process, because Agile estimation as such, there is no difference from one person to other person. They gone with the relative sizing and so on and so forth. But technically, they said that, we would need, say, when they translated into some kind of person hours, they ended up saying that, hey, we need, say, 40 people, for example. But while delivering, it ended up delivering with 120 people.
Okay.
Now, all the times that we have been always asking question to the Agile team is, do understand that we are trying to do the relative sizing, which is good, no problem with that. And we do understand that you wanted to bucket it into some kind of, relative task. But can you give me the effort? That is a question that always traditional estimation people keep asking the Agile teams. And all the times answer is that we cannot give you a number, estimated number. All we can give is the relative. So can you help us, how this really works? Even today, after 1.5 years, I'm still not able to understand this. And I can tell you that at least I have come across 4 or 5 different projects, and all the projects have the same problem. They are very good in terms of doing this relative sizing, but since as some of the service-oriented organizations, they work for the clients don't care for the relative sizing. They want the actual effort, right, which translates into some sort of pricing. And all the projects have been facing the same problem.
Okay, before I answer to your question, how did you do the estimation based on the team's opinion when you do the absolute estimation? Like you gave me an example that initially you had estimated it for like 40, 100 or something. So yeah, was it a collaborative estimate?
Yeah, first thing is, this particular project I'm talking about had the Agile coach, and they got a lot of Scrum Masters, close to 4 Scrum Masters, and they got all the capability support and so on and so forth. So which means that the people who came on board are someone who has been teaching, and mentoring people on the Agile project. So technically, yes, they followed all the steps in terms of taking the team's unified relative estimation model for each and every story points. They did that.
Okay, it's not the Scrum Master or the Agile coach. It is the team who plays a role here, because involving everyone in the team is the key here. So when you're doing an
team was pretty much part of it while going through each and every requirement and trying to do the relative sizing.
Yeah, because when you actually do that relative estimation, it's the team, because they come up with a different perspective. Every team member about the product, they will have a different perspective about it, how to implement it or the efforts which is required. And collectively, you come up with that effort or the absolute estimation, that is in the hours. You're saying you're good at the relative estimation, but mostly going down the line, the absolute estimation comes up as a hiccup, right?
Yeah, actually, what I come across is all along every project that at least I have been at least seeing or at least had a chance to look has been recommending and watching for, saying that get a group consensus, get the relative sizing, get the story points, all that parts are fine. But the only area wherein everyone is failing, possibly at least it's my view, I might be wrong, is that they are not able to give me the absolute number at the end of the day. And and just only one caveat here is that I don't know how far it is true in different places. We say that teams should come together and as a team should have consensus before giving some kind of relative number, right, in terms of story point numbers or whatnot. Now we bring those team members who doesn't understand this entire process in the first place, and when the agile coach or whoever sits in the room and when they start recommending and asking this consensus, people would just take one kind of flashcard just to get out of that particular meeting. They doesn't care much after that, because they don't understand what this 1, 5, 9 or whatever 8 and 40 does mean to them.
Okay, so I'll take this question later, because the whole concept of estimation is not clear in the team, which I see, because if you are actually there is no parallel numbers given to the story points and the task. Like for example, if there is a misconception that there should be some parallel numbering of story points and the task. For example, if there is a 5 story points, it should lead to 80 hours of work, or if it is 20 story points, it should lead to 120 hours of work. So there is nothing as such. It is the team which comes up with it, deciding the complexity, and later initially, as I have said in all the agile projects, initially the team finds it difficult, and then they do the very good estimate going down the line. So initially it is a tricky part, but if you say they are good at relative estimation and not good at absolute, then something is missing out there, because the team collectively they come up with how much of an effort is needed by the team. So they don't have to be forced by the management, because if you see here, it was actually 100 hours of work, but the team had estimated 240 hours of work, or so, for example. So maybe they might have been pressurized by the management, or something might have come up because they did not give them an individual opinion, or maybe there were some impediments or roadblocks which came up, which can be taken care of. But while estimation, we already consider that in the buffer item. So what I see here is when they were doing the estimation, there might be 2 cases. Either they did not pick up the buffer period correctly, because as I said, if you're doing the Fibonacci series, it is not a sequential number. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have a gap in between, right?
That's correct.
But that is because we are considering the buffer period here. Because if the team completes the work well before time, then it's okay. But if they need some buffer period there, that's why we have that range of Fibonacci series. And then when you do the absolute estimation, it is based on the individual team member who picks up that requirement. Because if, for example, if one requirement, I'm actually going to work on it. But if you are doing an estimation of it and you are very competent in that particular piece of work, you might estimate it only for 8 hours. And you might give it to the client that, okay, the estimate for this particular work is for 8 hours. But later, the actual person who is working on it is me. And I am new to the project. I don't know. I have to actually find my footing in the project. So my effort would not be 8 hours. It would be 16 hours. So here the estimation which has to be done should have been done by me and not by you. So this is the one of the point which I see here that might have led to this kind of what the
I get that. So what I would do is, maybe if the time still permits at the end of the session, maybe I'll add some complexity to that. Thank you so much.
Sure, yeah. So we have different techniques for doing the agile estimation. There are fun ways of implementing the estimation part. So one of the famous one is called as the planning poker. So it is a set of cards. If you have played the poker game, you know that what the name of poker implies. Like you must have heard poker faced or something like that. So poker faced is nothing but you're not letting the other person who is in front of you know what is going on or what number or what is in your card. You're giving a blank expression. So on basis of this particular game relies the planning poker. If you see here, this is a set of decks, the cards, which has the number of story points here. Starts from 0, 1, 2. It's the Fibonacci series, as I mentioned in my earlier slides. So 0 is when you have to estimate, you think that particular requirement is, it does not require any effort at all. It is like just a cakewalk. The requirement yet. You need some more clarification on it. And likewise, the other numbers are depending on how you estimate the effort which is required to complete that requirement. For example, if you pick up 5, then you think, okay, it is a medium range of requirement which might require some kind of effort, whereas 1 might require very less of an effort to complete that requirement. So the actual game goes by, so it's, just a second. So the team sits together. The Scrum Master, he reads out the requirement to the whole development team, and every member in the team has this particular set of cards which I have given. So the whole deck of cards is with every team member. So once the requirement is given out to the team, every team member picks up their card, thinking of how much, but they don't show it to the whole team at one particular time. It is only when the Scrum Master signals them to open up their card, it is only then that they show the whole card to everybody in the team. So when they show to the team, everybody might have a different perspective. Somebody might have rated it as 5. Somebody might have thought it is a complex piece of work. They might have rated it as 13 story point, and somebody might have rated it as something 3 or something like that. So it's very rare that every team member comes up with the same number in the card. If it is there, then that's a very good case and you can pick up that particular estimate. But if they are varying numbers, for example, the least number which one team member picked up was 5 and other team member picked up was 13, then the team sits down together and they discuss why they thought it was 5 and why they thought it was 13. So they give out reasons. They show out, okay, I thought given it as 13 story points, and the other person might explain, okay, this particular piece of work is already taken care of, hence I had estimated it as 5. So a common discussion happens and then the team comes up with one common number. So that is the relative estimation which is done by planning poker. If you see here, the whole team is involved in coming up with that particular estimate for that requirement. So this is one of the games which we apply for estimation, and there are many more. So for a co-located team, like the team which are seated together, you can use this planning poker, you can distribute the cards. But what about in today's market, you have distributed teams. You have teams residing in various countries. So you have planningpoker.com. There is a website called as planningpoker. Might use many communication channels or different innovative ways of playing this particular game. So that was the agile estimation and the various techniques of applying the agile estimation. So just to conclude on agile estimation, we first do the relative estimation, that is on t-shirt sizing, and then come out to the story points level. In the story points, you do it by using different games like planning poker. And then later when the team member who is going to pick up that requirement, they pick that particular requirement and then they do the absolute estimation that is based on hours. So in this case, the whole team is involved in the estimation process, and there is very rare chances of the estimation going wrong in this case, because you're already considering the buffer, and second, you're taking the team's input. You're taking the input of the team member who is actually going to work on that particular requirement. So next topic of today's webinar is prioritization in Agile. As I said earlier, in a product backlog, it is a list of all the user stories, all the requirements which are to be delivered for that product. But unlike a waterfall model, you don't have to have a detailed planning needed upfront to actually deliver the requirement to the customer. Only thing you need to do is you have to identify what the customer needs on priority, what is most important to him to be delivered, what is like which adds value to the market, and then you pick those requirements and place them on the topmost of the product backlog, and the team then picks it up, does the estimation and starts working on them. So the prioritization of the whole requirements are based on these following 6 criteria. That is the value it adds to the market, the cost which is required to implement it, the risk of implementation. If that particular requirement is not implemented in market, what is the risk which will be faced, and the dependence. So based on that, then there are some products which are based on release features. So based on releasability, and also based on the last factor, that is learning. So this is how the whole prioritization goes on. So there are various techniques of prioritization also in Agile. So one of the most common one is Kano analysis. Kano analysis is you divide the requirements in 4 criteria, that is must-haves, satisfiers, delighters, indifferent. Must-haves are the topmost priority requirements which has to be delivered. They are the baseline features. So if these features are not delivered, it will cause a dissatisfaction to the customers if they are absent. So, and then comes the satisfiers. So these requirements are like something, if they are given, then the customer is happy. And delighters are something which the customer was not expecting, some exciting features. So something as a bonus, some additional features which come in, which actually delights the customer when they receive it. And indifferent are the very least important requirements. The team puts it on the very bottommost of the product backlog. So the users don't find any value in these. So these are the ways how the product owner prioritizes the requirements in the product backlog based on these 4 criteria. And then there is a Moscow analysis. It's almost similar as the Kano. As you see the abbreviation here, Moscow stands for, first is the must-have, that is the mandatory requirements. Then the should-have, that is, it is a higher priority one. Could-have, that is desired but not necessary. So you can actually put that as a background. And then won't-have, that can be delayed for future releases. It's not at all mandatory. So must-haves are, you have to deliver it. You cannot deliver it on a target date without this, because there's no point in delivering the whole product if this particular feature, this particular requirement is not present in the product. Or it might be like there are some legal issues with that particular requirement, hence it has to be implemented first, or it is unsafe without implementing it, or the business case, you cannot deliver the business case at all without it. So these are the must-have. These are the very high topmost priority items which the team picks it up. Then the should-have. It is painful to leave them out, but if the time is very crucial, then you should leave it out. So you can have that, but it is not that vital. Same as then comes the could have. They are desirable features, but they are very less important. So it has very less impact if these are left out, and won't have a, that the whole team itself has agreed that they won't deliver it. Only if the time permits, then they might pick it up. So these are the different criteria on which the whole product backlog is listed. The product owner arranges all the requirements based on these techniques. Before the agile project works, before you go into the sprint planning and all of that, you first and foremost, the first planning session which you do is the agile release planning. So in the release planning, you pick up all the backlog items of the project, you review the whole release strategy considering the business needs, and then you prioritize them, and then you come up with the sprint duration, how much of sprints is needed for that particular release. So the product owners, scrum master, key stakeholders, they are the people who attend this release planning. So after this release planning, you have a set of timeline which is established, which is lists down all the sprints which are needed to complete that particular release. So if you see here in the bottommost part of the screen here, you have agreed that in release 1, you will be delivering one particular feature of a product. So for delivering feature 1, you would require 3 sprints. So after 3 sprints, you go ahead and do the release 1 implementation. And then for feature 2, you have decided, okay, we will require 4 sprints for completing feature 2. And after that, in release 2, you will deliver feature 2 of that particular product, and so on. If you see here, the sprint duration should remain the same throughout. In the release planning, if you have agreed that, okay, the sprint should consist of 2 weeks, then the 2 weeks of sprint should apply to the whole release. That is for release 1, release 2, release 3. You can add up sprints in between the releases, but you are not supposed to change the duration of the sprint. So usually in release planning, we use the approach of slice the cake. Because if I give you an example of this cake, if you have a cake in front of you, if I ask you to eat only the topmost layer, that is the cream layer, will you get the whole taste of the whole cake out here? The bottom, the chocolate flavor, and the middle layer and all of that? No, right? And if I ask you to eat just the bottom layer of the cake and understand the whole flavor of the cake as whole, no, that will also not give you. You have to have a slice of the cake to understand, okay, that this is the taste of the cake, starting from all the layers. So this is how you do the release planning also. This approach is used in the release planning of agile way of working. Here, you have to make the whole slice visible to the customer. You can't just deliver the UI to the customer and the backend is not working. You have to deliver one particular feature which is working on itself. It's a working software in itself. So whole part of that, the UI part, the web services part, the database part, everything has to be delivered to the customer. For example, an e-commerce website, if you are delivering the listing of some products based on the home appliances or something like that, you can't just display the UI and leave it as that and just deliver it to the customer. You have to have the whole web services, the back-end processing, all of that done, and then only you can deliver it. So then you can say, okay, this particular feature of listing the product based on the home appliances is ready and it can be delivered to the market. So this was about Agile, how we go ahead with this estimation in Agile and how do we do the prioritization in Agile. Of course, there are various frameworks in Agile. As I mentioned in my first webinar, there are Scrum, XP, Kanban, and so on. So there are different ways of implementing Agile, and based on these various frameworks, it depends on how, what is the requirement of your project. And then you pick it up, the different frameworks which actually suits your particular project. So in the next webinar, I'll be showing you the Scrum framework, which is one of the most important, and it's a very effective framework in today's market. So this is for today, the webinar. Any questions? Just let me know.
So while you can think about your questions, I am initiating the next poll. Please feel free to answer that. So I think since we have time, let's try to unmute Mr. Shiv Naresh, or yeah, you are unmuted.
Okay, thank you so much. Anushree, again, just stop me with my questions because just trying to get some clarity. And again, I'll go from in the series of topics covered, I'll go from the bottom to top. First thing is, mostly in terms of changing requirements, right? This is something which has always been a big concern in the Agile delivery projects.
Yes.
When can you say that, you have now control in terms of this? This is a common question possibly, but when can you say that now you have control in terms of the requirements, that any further changes would be treated as change requests? And following question is, are there any best practices?
Okay, when you have started with a particular sprint, when you have fixed the requirement for that particular sprint, that time you say that, okay, this requirement is freezed for this particular sprint. So if there are any changes on this requirement, you will not pick that up. It will be picked it up only after the sprint is completed. So for example, if you have picked up 5 requirements for that sprint, they are actually fixed for that particular sprint, for the whole project as such. So but in between the sprint, you have a meeting which is called as a backlog grooming meeting. So for example, in the third requirement, the customer comes up, okay, there are some changes. You have to change this particular requirement. So in the product backlog grooming, which is in the duration of the sprint, you will then modify that requirement and you will push it to the next sprint. You will not pick it up in that particular sprint.
So technically what we're saying is within the sprint, obviously, yes, you can obviously control and you will not accept or pass the product backlog, and it can be picked up later. Now maybe I come from the top down. Given the traditional delivery is the themes which I worked on. At the beginning of the project, usually clients that comes, right, they might not have a greater understanding of what this Agile is all about. What they would know by default is that what is the outcomes it can generate, are the best things that it can generate. Now they come with a big scope saying that, hey, tell me how much it is going to cost and price it along the same way. But I'm not seeing that Agile pricing to the clients is different versus a traditional waterfall or iterative approach, the way that we try to do pricing to the client. Because whichever method you follow, at the end of the day, client wants the price and the schedule by which you can deliver their entire scope, right?
Yes.
So in that case, at the beginning of the project, it is not so easy to identify or even to understand the granular level of requirements.
Yes.
Which can evolve only at the sprint level, possibly. Then how can you give the estimate at the beginning of the project? Is it possible, and is it the right approach?
Yes, you have to anyways give up the estimate. That is the timeline. Like for example, if I go to one particular team, I need this product released in market by December. So that is a tentative timeline which I give. And based on the December, that is the end period, then only you come up with the various releases which would require for that particular completion of that particular product. So anyways, in whether it's a waterfall model or it's an agile model, you have to give a definite timeline when the customer wants that product to be implemented in market. Based on
No,
that,
schedule
because
is fine. I have no problem in terms of fixing the schedule, maybe 2 years, 6 months, 12 months. That there is no problem with the schedule part is concerned. Purely I'm talking from the costing perspective, pricing perspective to the client.
So that's why when you're going with agile, I mean it is not usually recommended that you should go ahead with fixed price contract, because
Correct.
if you go with fixed price, then you have anyways agreed that you're going to implement in agile. Hence you are bound to pick up any scope changes or any requirements which are coming in, and then the cost will increase, but then it is anyways you have agreed to the fixed price. So it is not advisable to go with a fixed price in agile. But still, if you go with a fixed price in the project, when you are actually charting down the project requirement, you are signing off the project, you have to specify a timeline. Okay, these are the number of requirements. Up to this particular percentage, you will be able to pick up the changes in the requirement. If it goes beyond, then you have to actually go and change the whole scope of the project and the costing and all of that. So initially, the stakeholders who initiate the project initiation and they do the case study and they get the business case, they mention this in one of the disclaimer that this is the percentage of requirement which we will pick it up based on the agile way of working. But if it goes beyond, then of course it will induce extra cost or something, because otherwise then there is no clarity. The customer can come up with all the requirements at any point of the time, and the duration will change and the scope will get changed. So you have to anyway specify this, a part of it.
Yeah. Maybe that's the projects where I come across where there were clients were forcing the projects to come with a fixed estimate to go with the fixed pricing. And these guys have no clue, because clients doesn't understand first of all what Agile is all about. All they say is you need to follow Agile delivery model, and then you need to give a price. The other part which I'm not still trying to understand is, with respect to sprints are concerned, we always keep saying that it got to be fixed duration.
Yeah.
And consistent duration across the board. Now, if the end outcome that what we are trying to achieve is a product which is fully usable product, which is fully functional at every release, then what is such a big challenge? If I'm, for example, in the release 1 here in the screen, what if I'm trying to change from sprint 3 from traditional 4 weeks to 6 weeks? Because at the end of the day, my major objective is to deliver feature 1 in the best possible way that can be deployed to the market, right?
Okay, sprint comes from Scrum framework. And one of the basic principle of Scrum is everything in Scrum, starting from the meetings to any events in Scrum, should be time boxed. Because it gives a sense of clarity, or a sense of like the team obeys to that particular time frame. And they know, okay, we only have 2 weeks and we have to put our whole 100% in 2 weeks, and there is no extension of it. Because if you already give the team a scope that, okay, we might change the 2 weeks to 3 weeks, they might become lethargic in their work, they might try to push it, and they might not give their 100%. So that's why they say that every sprint should be time boxed. You can't go and extend it. And one of the another reason is because if there are any changes coming in, okay, if there are any modification also, it's okay. You can push it up to the next sprint anyways. Because the duration anyways does not matter. Okay, as you're saying, the working at the end you have a working software. So fine, if you don't have a working software in the first sprint, you might collectively combine the result of first 2 sprints and deliver it to the customer. You can give the demo session after the first 2 sprints, saying that first sprint was a more of a technical development, and then we will be giving you a demo after the sprint, but like a collective one, or you can release it after sprint 2. So it's not mandatory, or there is no rule that you should have a working software after each sprint, because that's not possible in real case.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to combine.
I'm especially talking at sprint 3 in this case, just because now the feature 1 is about to get released, because release 1 is coming and feature 1 is about to be deployed, right? And in sprint 3, we committed for something for whatever reasons. It is getting spilled over, and I just want to extend by another week or 2, sprint 3, and which when I talk to Agile practitioners, they say no, strictly not at all encouraged, and we will not do it.
See, there is some problem here. Like for example, you're saying you have to extend it to sprint 3, accepted, but this should not have been, this should not come into picture only at the end of like when you are actually nearing the completion of sprint 3. It should have been monitored even in the start of the sprint, because that's why Scrum Masters are there in the team, to understand how the team is progressing, if there are any roadblocks or impediments. So if that was the case, they could have highlighted it to the product owner, and then when the team was working on the task, they could have picked up that, okay, this particular task they could have consulted the product owner, and they could have decided, okay, we can remove this particular piece of work from the requirement, and we can deliver this whole sprint and just stick to the timelines. So this could have been one of the cases. So what I see here is the Scrum Master is not performing the role properly, because it's if you come up that at the end of the sprint you'll come up, okay, and we need 1 more week to complete this sprint, then there is something wrong in the team, because this should have been identified during the sprint itself, way before, because you are giving a regular update to the Scrum Master. So the Scrum Master knows how the team is progressing, what is the state of the sprint. So then he goes to the product owner, and then they again reprioritize it, and then they come up with, okay, we can only deliver this particular chunk. The product owner will then speak to the customer, and they might remove some features, and they pick up only the features which can be incorporated in that particular duration and deliver it to the customer. So it's all about mindset, if you ask me, how you are implementing it. So there can be gap in your team. The team is not actually communicating properly to the Scrum Master, and hence at the end they come up that, okay, this is the duration. So it's all about the mindset and way of working. So which is very, it takes time to adopt to it.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, most welcome. Any other questions?
Okay. Yeah, so I think there was a question. So there is actually they have pointed out that the handouts have been, earnestly put for last week. So we will email everybody these handouts, these slides at least, and a couple of announcements before we close. So next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, we have 2 webinars all on digital marketing. First one is how to choose a digital marketing agency. And while it might sound like, it is some, we are advising you on choosing an agency, but really it is more about what do you expect from a third party to help you in terms of, presenting your the requirements and things like that. Apart from that, the next webinar will be on how to do inbound marketing. So essentially, you have a great product, you have a great technology, you want customers to come to you. So you want to do very, very customized, very targeted campaigns and call the customers to you. So they come to your site or start calling your phone, interact with you on your website, and you can make them your customers. So if there are no further questions, I would close the webinar. Milka, you have any passing comments?
No, no. I think there are no questions.
Okay. So thank you. Thanks for attending. See you next week on Saturday. While it's a holy weekend, I think you would have played Holi and whatever. Some of you might want to go to the mass on Good Friday, but come do back on Saturday. Thank you very much.